Welcome back. We're the Book Mavens. I'm Amanda and she's Rachel, and you are joining us for our monthly read of The Sword of Kaigan. Rachel?
Okay, well,
I'm still kind of emotionally processing this book. So this book was recommended to us by one of our wonderful readers. Rachel, hit us with a summary.
okay. All right. So the Sword of Kaigan. So it's a family drama. It's a lot with we have a mother and her son. A mother and her son primarily is the focus for the first half of the novel, but so much of this is centered around our main female character, Misaki, and her life with this family and who she chose to be, and trying to fit a very complex person into a small box, and the consequences of doing so, I think more than anything else, reflects to me, was the most important thing about this book. And I loved it. I thought it was so well done. The characterization, because you're with Misaki primarily through the majority of the novel. We do get some different perspective between her and her son, Mamoru, and what's happening. And it is so beautifully written. There's beautiful battle scenes in here that are just epic level. I mean, it's like Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon on steroids. Like, it's incredible. The history, there's a lot of samurai culture that's built into this. What I do think is very interesting about this is that I thought this was a historical fantasy novel, and it's not. It's actually taking place on another planet. So I actually got a little bit of Mistborn vibes, even though it's a different type of magic system. It's very interesting because the magic system for this book is elemental, and the primary ability that we're looking at is water manipulation, and everything that can happen, or liquid manipulation, because there are some rare blood manipulators as well in here, which is a pretty interesting skill. And
I admit too that until Rachel told me, I didn't realize it was on another planet. I told her when she finished it before I even started. She like went all in. And I texted her, I was like, I am struggling to figure out what time period this is in. And she's like, because it's not. Totally.
It's not.
It all made so much more sense.
Well, it's really interesting because when I was finished with this novel, I really wanted to understand more about, actually, I was initially investigating why it was self-published, because this seems like
so good,
a knock out of the park bestseller to me. I mean, like, I don't remember if you guys will recall last holiday season, and I was gaga for Red Rising, and that was my main gift purchase for people. That was the book I gave for the holiday season. And this is going to be mine this year. Like, this is amazing. And I haven't stopped gushing about it. It is really, really remarkable. And so my initial investigation to the author, was to figure out why that is. And I ended up reading this article where she was talking about, it was an interview, and she was talking about what inspired her, because it's a Theonite war story. And so she has a whole other series of books that are YA, and this is definitely an adult novel. And so it's actually like a prequel to the events in her other Theonite novels, which focus more on the children of our main characters in this. And so our author, she's a martial artist. She actually teaches Taekwondo and is an expert, but she went and had lessons in how to fight with a katana. So all of her scenes are just so meticulously researched in terms of the movement she uses. A lot of the the movements alone, I think, are just really, really remarkable. But what was most interesting about that interview was the place that this came from. She talked about that she was in a place of extreme depression when she wrote this, and which I thought was very interesting. And the interviewer was asking, would you ever do more set in this timeline? And she said, absolutely not. She said, this was something that reflected what I was experiencing at the time. And I found that so moving, because there are parts of this book that felt so intensely personal that you really felt like you were there. You were kind of living this kind of self-discovery journey that Misaki's going through. And it's really hard to read sometimes. And it makes you self-reflect about your own decisions that you've made in your life. Are you really living an authentic life? Are we shaping ourselves like water to move and flow around the other people in our lives that we have given a higher significance to than ourselves? And so I think this is such an interesting self-exploration, especially for women. And there's a lot of cultural expectations for who women should be, how much they should give of themselves, pieces and pieces taken for their children, for their husbands, and what's left. And this character spends a lot of time reminiscing about events in her past and regrets that she has. And so much of this journey is her coming to terms with where she is now and how much she held back of herself that now she's paying the price for. And a lot of that is her relationship with her children. And then also coming to know this man who you don't like. 3/4 of the book, you don't like him. You don't understand why he is the way he is. It's a big mystery.
Right at the end.
And then all of a sudden, it just makes so much sense. And she gets it as you get it. And you're like, oh, okay. And it just gives her a foundation to build from in this new reality that they're in. And I love that. And I would love to see their journey expand, but I know I'm not going to get it. So I have to be satisfied with that. And I just thought this was just a really beautiful book.
Yeah, and I think I'm okay because like you can tell at the end that she intended there to be more of them. And so like my Kindle version had a kind of in the acknowledgments at the end, a link where you could go read about why she decided not to continue more in that series. And like she actually didn't talk about what she said you read, like listened to her interview, what she's in part, she said she kept trying to write stories and that it just wasn't coming, like it just wasn't clicking. And like, and while it's fun, that doesn't good universe building make. And I thought it was so interesting because she talked about her skills. She's like, maybe in 3 years or 30 I'll feel like I have this skill. But she's like, a lot of the things that I wrote when I was younger that tie into this universe. So you can tell that she's been thinking about this universe for a long time because she referenced like stories she wrote when she was young. But she realizes that now that it was so interesting because she felt her skill was inadequate to the task of this story, which I found so interesting. And honestly, I have so much respect for it that she won't. One, I don't think she needs to worry too much about her skill because this book is beautiful. Like, I'm so impressed with the writing of this book. But on the other hand, it's so interesting to me, like what she must have in her mind about it, and must feel so frustrated that she can't seem to get out on the paper in the way she did in this one. So it's just so interesting. But I could definitely see what she says about depression and the regret. I mean, there are parts of this book that are just so visceral. Like her, and I think laying on it the elemental nature of the kind of the magic system, right? The Gia system is so interesting because it really fosters that that really visceral kind of animalistic response in a way. Like, you know, they're talking about the wind and the water and the mountain and these forces of nature, but they're really also talking about internal emotions, which just makes for an incredibly visual experience. But it definitely it had its moments. There were a couple moments where it gave me Poppy War flashbacks because okay, listen guys, it's definitely not at the graphic level of Poppy War.
No.
At all, but it definitely had moments where I was like okay because they were intense. It was very intense, the battle scenes. And a good, what would you say, maybe like a third of the book, a quarter of the book is battles, maybe more.
Yeah, I mean, the battles don't really get started till about the halfway point, but that entire experience is so detailed, and then you're with these different characters at different moments of time that it's very expansive. So it feels like it's over a large chunk of time, but it's like hours like that you're spending, and it's their experiences. But it's not just the physical battle, it's everything that's happening to them emotionally. It's about self-discovery, about what they're capable of doing. And you really see that the most with her son, with Mamoru. And him coming to terms with who he is and his abilities, and to be able to do something breathtaking that nobody will know, is really remarkable. And so much about Mamoru, his story tied with Misaki, but not just Misaki, but also her husband. And how they process. I really don't want to spoil this, because I think that this is a book that if you have not read it, I don't want this to be something that spoils it for you. So I don't want to give too much away about it, but it's in terms of the shared experience they're having about feelings of guilt, and how that's represented in terms of, we have this horrible battle and losing people that we love, and having regrets and grief tying up into this really nasty snarl of a situation. And the way that it's represented in this spiritual way, about almost being visited, but are you really being visited? Are these your own feelings that are coming out that are being reflected? And so much of that is done so beautifully, and it's heartbreaking. And to see regret, not being able to have formed the relationships that you wanted, because you had closed yourself off to everything. So you see that with Misaki in terms of how she's shut herself off of everything, and her husband in terms of how he does it, which is so wow. And and how isolated they are, living side by side for like 16 years. And that journey was just really beautiful. But our side characters are great too. We have some strong women represented here.
I love me that Tsuko.
Yeah, she was good.
So is she is Saki's sister-in-law. She marries the oldest brother and the head of the house, but she's a little bit of a Cinderella story, because so he basically, the oldest brother, waits for their father to pass, because he is a horribly abusive person. Yeah. And then because he knows his dad would never let him marry her because she's from the village, she's not of a noble house, so he kind of waits till she dies, and then he marries her anyway because he loves her. And I love their relationship, but I love what she does for Misaki. She is just this person who will not allow life to get her down, and she provides this kind of touch point, I think, for Misaki as she goes through things, and then even after, in the aftermath of the battles, and when they're all dealing with their grief in different forms, and the rebuilding and all the things that happen, she provides this alternative approach to dealing with things. Like she shows her a different way that you can still find the joy, which I think is really important for Mitsuki, because you're right that she isolates herself so much. And it's interesting to me that her and her husband, both all the things they did were essentially to survive, like emotionally survive what was happening to them, right? And the choices that they were making. And then it just becomes deeper and more entrenched in their patterns, until they're very forcibly forced to confront each other in a new way. And it's just I spent a lot of the book, every time we would have a flashback to her past, my heart broke, because it just broke. And the road, and it's always the what if, the road not taken, right? And all the things she thinks about she could have done and she should have done and did, and all this different stuff. And then I think you nailed it so perfectly, that it's this realization and like coming to terms with the choices she's made, and learning to like move forward with that. And I will admit, I'm very American.
No.
I could feel a lot of because listen, this is culturally very different, because America is very much it's a very individualist society, right? It's about forging your own path and making your own choices. And that's not what this book is about. This book is very much on a kind of a sacrifice culture, that there's a collectivity to it, that you do what you do for your village, you do what you do for your family, and that often involves letting other people make your choices, or at least you feel like they make your choices and you respect that and go along with it. And there were moments in this book that was very difficult for me to mentally process, which is good for you. I love that about this author, is that it really pushed me to think about my own choices, because it is a fantasy novel, and it is, but there are some things about it that are just so innately human nature, like the way that we look back on life and we regret. I mean, it was just so profound in a way. It's probably one of the most profound books I read this year.
Mhm.
And I told Rachel this. I had a hard time kind of getting going in it, not because it was not wonderful. Like, it wasn't, I could tell that it was a really good book. I just really struggled to like make myself make the time. And then I'm like sobbing about 60% into the book. And I'm like, this is why you're resisting, because you knew it was going to be such a ride. Your emotions are everywhere. Oh,
It's just, I just really appreciate her journey. And I wasn't sold. I think we start off in the book with Mamoru's perspective, and I really wasn't looking forward to being with this teenager going through his own journey. And his own journey became very complex and worth it. But initially, it wasn't until I hit Misaki and then listening to her, and I was like, all right, I'm in. Like, but that's like a few pages into the book. Like, it's pretty early. So I was really hooked from the get-go, because so much of that was just fascinating. Like, to me, like, I see Misaki as, like the little boy with this finger in the dam, that it's, if I let anything crack, if I let anything of myself, of who I truly am, come out, this is something that I won't be able to control, and that everything will crumble around me, and what will I have left? And I think so much of her relationship with Suzuki, right? I always mess with the names so bad. Yes. And she, I think so much of it is jealousy that she's able to exist as her true authentic self. And Misaki feels like that is not something she could do. That this family she married into is incredibly traditionalist in terms of male and female roles and what that looks like. And because she was censored so heavily by her father-in-law, that this was what was wanted, or what she thought they wanted. And, you see there's all of these kind of revelatory experiences that happen towards the end of the book, where you realize they're so much more complex, and that her family really her father did not make a bad choice for her. A lot of it, because we're talking about families with real power, that it is about making matches where you have power match power. And when you find out about her abilities and what she's capable of doing, as well as her husband's, that they're a matched pair. And so much about it is that they're identical. They're both with their fingers in these just floodgates, just holding it together, that if they were to let anything slip, everything would come crashing down. And so much of that is so relatable sometimes, when you just feel like you're on this balance beam of life. And if one foot's gonna slip off, everything's gonna fall down. The routine's over, it's done. But doing that means that you can't process and function with the people in your life. You have nothing to give, because you're so focused on keeping everything back. And I think that's that whole story. And when you see those cracks start with Misaki, when she is kind of, her and Mamoru really have to face things about each other, and that she has something to offer her son. But that means slowly pulling that finger out of that dam to let a little trickle of who she really is come out. And then, but once that finger's removed from that dam, and those cracks just start, and she cannot contain who she is. And it's such a great story of self-discovery. I love it. I try to stick to the themes, because I really don't want to give away too many plot points.
I don't want to spoil anything.
I really
there
don't.
Are so many. I want people to read this book, because it's so good. But there are so many. There's just so many good things. It is so good. I feel it absolutely crushes me that it took them 15 years, though, to recognize how similar they are, and to find a way to communicate beyond that, right? Like, I think for me, and like, there's so much sadness and tragedy in the book. I mean, it's a war story, right? and there's so much tragedy in it. But I honestly, that is one of the biggest ones for me. It's that tragedy of the lost time that just really, it's still days later, it just that kind of sits and eats at my brain, and it's just, ugh.
I really enjoyed it. I think that the only thing that I didn't love was like the last 15 pages or so. I
Yeah.
I didn't to me it felt like it was going, this is going to make no sense to anybody who hasn't read it, but those of you who have read it, you know what I'm talking about. It's about just the last few pages. It just seems that we were taking a step backwards. And did we really need certain loose threads to be tied off for the story to have been a fabulous story? No, I don't really think it was necessary. Now, I think that perhaps it was in terms of connecting this to her other books, that's how she was making that connection, that these people were going to come together in some way, and that's why their children will know each other. So like I get that.
I thought it was for too. The last 15 felt like a bridge to the next thing.
Yeah.
Then since eventually she talked about how hard that decision was to not do that. You know, not that I mean, I don't know that she needs to go, like, I don't think you need to go edit it out later, but in my mind, I kind of disregard a lot of that, because once I got to the end and realized it wasn't gonna connect to anything else, I didn't worry about it too much. Like, I just didn't think about those connectors of character. I just said, okay. And then I went back to thinking about the earlier story.
So I don't know, maybe if she had even just separated it out as like an epilogue, even just to have labeled it that way instead of like another chapter, that I would have been able to separate it a little bit. Like, okay, no, we have come to our full resolution, like it's done. Because I wanted that resolution to happen without having to come face to face with this other life. I didn't think that was necessary. So yeah, I think just maybe just titling it as an epilogue instead of this continuing chapter, that the story is still evolving. I was done. It evolved to the point where I was very, very satisfied. And it just felt almost like where you have this beautiful, you know, you have your rising action, your climax, and your falling action, and your conclusion, and then you just end up with this kind of like extra long tail going just a little longer past where I wanted that curve to end.
But I still really loved the last pair. Like there's a character from her past that comes up, and that's the kind of connecting feature. If you ignore him and you just go to like those final moments where she's watching the sunset with her husband, though, I did love that scene, because it was kind of disregarding this pulling of threads part, and it was like back to the theme of Misaki and her husband and their family. I did love that at the end. And there was a beautiful metaphor, because early in the book she watches the sun rise with her son, and then she watches the sun set with her husband. Think about that too. Such a good book, guys. Definitely need to need to read it. You all need to read it. Put it down. I don't recommend, I mean, to be honest with you, like, I am very careful when I recommend books like the Daevabad trilogy or Poppy War, not because they're not wonderfully written, but because they are an emotional experience. And this one also an emotional experience, but I found that it's overcome it for me. And maybe it's because it's a standalone and not like a multi-book arc, but I want more people to read this, because I feel like the journey that you go on within yourself is worth it.
It's like it empties you out and then fills you with this kind of philosophical, contemplative feeling that leaves you feeling hopeful for a future. And so about ready to take a step forward. And I think that's the kind of journey I would love for a book to do. I don't mind being drained emotionally, as long as you're going to fill me back up in a way that I'm going to have gotten something positive out of it. Unlike Poppy War, that just drained you and left your desiccated corpse on the ground when it's done, you know.
And then
other things to fill you back up.
What a good description, Rachel. Yeah. And then I just laid there on the ground and kind of sobbed. And I still see, like, I'll skim through my Kindle and see that cover, and I'm still just like, no, not ready to speak. Those books are, can't put them down, but dang, You pay
I mean, you're
a high price for it. But
what else I thought was really interesting is that this is the only book that goes into the samurai culture aspect as much. Like her other books, it goes into the one that starts with a Y. What was that one? The drawing a blank on the name. But like the other ones, she says it was more of like a West African influence, I believe. Oh. Yeah, not
interesting.
Not Japanese at all. So I thought, wow, what an exploration she did. And so, because she's not Japanese, she's Chinese. She's Chinese, I think, like just her own, ancestral background, just like what's going on. I'm trying to find her thing. Yeah. So she's in Wisconsin. Yep.
The Midwest.
Yeah. I just thought it was very interesting that she chose cultures that are not similar to her own. And I just think, wow, as somebody who has attempted to write, this idea of writing so far out of my own culture is something that's terrifying, just because the amount of research, you want to make sure you get it right. And so I guess in terms of what you're talking about her hesitation about how good her writing is and whether or not she could tell a story, having to go so far out of your own experience, that's a journey,
But let me tell you, girl,
a little reticent about it.
You can do it. You can do, I believe it. I've read this book. You can do anything you want to do. I believe in you and I will read it.
I really want there to be a hardcover so bad. I really wish one of our boxes would pick it up. Like, why Broken Binding wouldn't do this? This is going to be a classic one day. It needs to be bound. And I love that it's a standalone. It's not a big trilogy. Because so many of the fantasy books are trilogies.
It's hard to find a standalone fantasy at this level of quality. And I absolutely agree with that. They really should put us in charge of choosing which books, because Temeraire needs some hardcovers. Robin Hobb needs some better hardcover options. There are Robin Hobb options. I just don't like any of them. I'm saying they should put us in charge of it. Okay. Thanks for joining us for our September read of The Sword of Kaigan. If you have read this book before, drop a message in the comments. Tell us what you thought. If you haven't read it, you are missing out. You need to go get it. FOMO needs to kick in. You are missing out. And we are talking about it. So go get your own copy and read it for yourself. So since this is our monthly read for September, we're going to go ahead and tell you what our monthly read for October is going to be. So since it is spooky month, we chose a witchy book. We're going to be reading The Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches by Sangu Mandana. We're not sure about her last name, but we're going to figure it out. So The Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches. It's got a lot of great reviews as being kind of just a really joyful, delightful kind of romp, if you will. A Halloween Hallmark movie is what it reads like to me, which is my cup of tea. So throughout the month, I'll be here for your non-spooky reads, and Rachel will cover the more traditional Halloween scary stuff.
Yeah, I got some titles lined up. I'm excited.
Yes, Amanda does not love Halloween as a general rule. So,
I'm looking to bump the gooses, so we're going to make it happen.
No, thank you. Go ahead and get your copy of this book, because we will be on October 25th, the last Tuesday of the month, discussing that read together, The Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches. And we will see you then. See you next time. Bye. It was also our best buy yet.
I have my hand up here.
You were ready. Thank you. I appreciate that. That's important to me, and that you